It's strange to be encouraged to stay at home, but my time out of work during the wave of COVID-19 was a productive one to say the least. While Florida soccer moms were going crazy for having to wear masks and stay indoors, I was thriving in the comfort of my home.
Since I was left in a hot car, you want to cover my face? I'm going to hyperventilate.
I enjoy a lot of different mediums, so for time to stop and allow me to catch up in the areas I was lacking was quite the blessing, and I'd like to share some of my findings with you. Feel free to skip around because I'm going to be going through various categories, and I can't expect everyone to dig everything I go through. Big shout out to Eyepatch for his seasonal videos for giving me the idea to do these variety packs. Now, let's get into it. Horror and comedy are two genres that have a complicated relationship, to say the least. It's not something that hasn't been done before, of course, but creations tend to lean way more in one direction than the other. Take Shaun of the Dead leaning way more into comedy, or us leaning way more into horror. Well, I've found the perfect 50-50 blend of both in manga form, and it is glorious. Mieruko-Chan started in 2018 and is written and drawn by Tomoko Izumi. Simple premise, it follows a girl that suddenly begins seeing these horrific, Silent Hill-esque ghosts. She realizes that they're trying to figure out if she can see them, and so there's all these Junji Ito jump scare moments where she has to try and keep composure because who knows what will happen if they find out she can see them. Her reactions to seeing the ghosts always gets a good laugh out of me, plus they'll put her in a situation where she's walking through a haunted house or having to juke these things out in an alleyway without being obvious. You show up for the comedy and horror when suddenly the story opens up beyond its episodic nature and gets pretty deep and sometimes sad, much in the way that Mob Psycho did. There aren't many chapters out, so there isn't much else to say, but it's something I couldn't go without mentioning because it's a really fun and terrifying read that any fan of horror will feel refreshed after reading. If you've ever seen or heard of Great Teacher Onizuka, or GTO, this next selection is gonna feel very familiar. Rookies was written and drawn by Masanori Morita from 1998 to 2003, also known for Rokudenashi Blues and being the assistant of Tetsuo Hara on Fist of the North Star. Rookies follows Koichi Kawato, a follow-your-dreams-at-any-cost new teacher at a less-than-impressive school. The baseball team is full of delinquents that have little care for anyone but themselves, but Kawato steps in as the coach to help them recognize their dreams and find or refresh the passion they have for the sport. It takes a lot of work, and the story does an excellent job exploring the individual struggles of nearly every member of the team for a slow-burning, emotional story of success when everyone in the region doubts them. It's really cool to see the growth from being absolutely terrible to finding their own way of helping the team without miraculously becoming monstrous at the sport, as anime and manga tend to do. Even the antagonist characters are very grounded and not inherently evil just because. Kawato isn't even a good baseball coach. He doesn't even know the rules of the game at first, but he executes in what he knows as more of a mental coach and a lifter of spirits, leaving the technical aspects to the experienced players and the vice principal. Realistic dramas like this in manga form are always really nice to get into on occasion because of how much easier it is to relate to what's going on. It's a hell of an underdog story and has plenty of delinquent action panels to keep the meatheads interested. So I was itching for something that screamed over the top and action-packed to read. X-Men was my favorite television show growing up, so I'm quite the sucker for 90s designs. That's why Todd McFarlane's Spawn ended up being the perfect fit for me. McFarlane has been drawing the series since 1992 and is still making it to this day. In fact, while issue 307 came out just a couple of days ago, he told IDW co-founder and CEO last year, "After 301 issues, I only feel like I've told half my stories. I've got another 300 in my head, and only plans to end the series if people show they don't want the character to exist any longer. And if he's made it 300 issues without that happening, I don't see it stopping anytime soon. I really enjoy the aspect of getting into new superhero worlds. Being tied to Marvel and DC for most of my life, stepping out and seeing something like Spawn or even My Hero Academia almost automatically becomes a hit. New villains, side characters, cities, designs, it's awesome. Not only is Spawn loaded with the over-the-top action and all that superhero goodness, but the story lets you know right away that there's surprisingly complicated puzzles at play here that'll take quite some time to complete. You see, Al Simmons was an assassin for the CIA. One day, he was murdered by his own partner and sent to hell because of his cold life as an assassin. Naturally, he makes a deal with the devil to become a hellspawn in order to see his wife one last time. He's sent back to Earth reborn as an abomination with little memories of his past life. He was played. When digging into some files, he realizes it's been 5 years since his death and his wife has moved on, living happily with his best friend, and they have a child. Something he could never provide her with. You focus on one aspect and it's already way too intense, but adding everything together you feel so much sympathy for Al in less than 10 issues. Al has to figure out how to use this incredible power he's been given like Spider-Man. His personality is like a heavy metal, no-holds-barred Batman, quiet but not afraid to tear someone in half, and he has the "I wish I could just die but that would be too easy" weight the Incredible Hulk deals with. It's dark, it's gritty, it's 90s as fuck, and it speaks volumes as an immediate creation, after McFarlane and others broke off of working with Marvel and DC to create their own independent company where you own what you make. My time in quarantine was without a doubt spent mostly on playing games, but I only really have two I'd like to note. First is Griftlands, developed and published by Clay Entertainment, known mostly for their work on Don't Starve and Crypt of the Necrodancer. They've created no games with mixed or negative reviews at the time of making this video. To explain Griftlands and its importance to me, I need to back up a little bit. Games with replayability are usually my go-to. That's why I lean more towards strategy games, and a genre within strategy I've gotten into the last couple of years are deck builders. A friend I worked with brought over the board game Clank one night, and ever since then I was obsessed. I was the Magic the Gathering guy in high school, so I'll sign up for anything with cards. In deck builders, you generally start off with a small amount of basic cards with nothing special, and as you progress, you buy or acquire different cards to make up your own identity for your deck. Obviously, every game will have its own thing that makes it different from the other, but that's the rundown of what you're doing. Griftlands combines the Slay the Spire deck building mechanic and action sequences with the Telltale dialogue system, and it couldn't have been executed more beautifully. The game is still in early access, but the content in early access is more than I've seen in a lot of fully released games. You play as one of two, soon-to-be 3 characters, Sal and Rook. Sal is an independent bounty hunter and Rook is a spy, former member of Admiralty, the military force of the Empire. So both characters give you the freedom to make allies and enemies with whoever you see in the game and craft your character the way you want to. You'll do quests for people and you'll undoubtedly end up making someone mad and someone happy depending on how you play the situation, as you have a negotiation deck and a combat deck. Both pretty self-explanatory. My favorite part of the game was at the end of each day it gives you a rundown of who loves you, hates you, and what cards you acquired from that day of questing. It felt so cool to see how every decision I made affected the timeline of my character's life in this city. Like I said, it's still in early access and they're very clear about listening to the suggestions from those playing the game, so I can't wait to see what the release of the game will look like, as it's already a full-blown masterpiece in my opinion. Unlimited replayability and enjoyment. Do you know that show Off the Air that comes on Adult Swim around 4 a.m. on occasion? Well, I found a game that gives you the exact same feeling that show does. Hylics is an experimental video game with JRPG elements made in RPG Maker, but the charm is in its exploration. There's a distinct bizarre claymation aesthetic that feels like that picture of the stroke simulation. You know, that one where everything looks familiar but you can't quite point out any one thing? That's what the world feels like, and being able to walk through something like that is a trip. A lot of the dialogue is randomly generated text and there isn't much story, but it's still fun trying to piece one together going through all of the madness. It almost feels like a satire of the genre, as everything is thrown at you, you just kind of accept it because you have to and keep pressing forward despite not getting it at all. The game is only around 2 to 3 hours long, but there is a sequel game that came out this month. Considering the first game is dirt cheap on Steam, I would at least check that one out first to see if it's your thing or not. I personally love things I can't understand, so this game was an experience I'll revisit often. I'll leave it at that because I'm gonna mention this game in another video I'm doing, but chances are you can add up if you love it or hate it already. Also, I started playing Smite, and that game is pretty fucking cool. I know MOBAs are hated, but I like them a lot, and Yamoja is a treasure. Alright, movies and shows time. What would happen if you combined Adventure Time with Super Jail? We had no answer to such a question until Midnight Gospel came out on Netflix earlier this year. Or at least that's the way I see it in my head. And while that deserves praise all on its own, it's much more than that. The show is created by Duncan Trussell and creator of Adventure Time, Pendleton Ward. It has a podcast format taken from Duncan Trussell's own podcast titled The Duncan Trussell Family Hour. Our main character, Clancy, Duncan Trussell's voice, take a drink for every time I've said his name in this segment, space travels to different dimensions to interview different beings for his badass spacecast. The topics vary from spirituality, the gravity of death, losing touch socially, etc., but the animation around these interviews stands independent from them. So if you're not catching what's being discussed, the animation can carry itself with ease for an entertaining experience. It's beautiful, vibrant, and hilarious, but also eye-opening and moving if you're following the interviews closely. I think adult animation is still on a climb, and creative works like this that don't rely on slapstick comedy are becoming more and more common. Kind of like Hylics mentioned before, I think if you're on the fence about whether you'll like this one or not, maybe skip it. People have been sick and tired of found footage tapes since the very first Cloverfield, and I've never understood it. Sure, it can be quite unrealistic for someone to document anything without saying fuck it and running for their lives, but it never derailed my personal immersion. I don't know if it's because of my love for horror video games, but it actually amplified it for me, and some of my favorite films follow this format. Well, I checked out the Korean horror film Gonjiam Haunted Asylum from 2018, and it really proved that the found footage genre still has some fight left. There's this popular YouTube channel where they set up some fake scares in haunted places and bathe in the views. Well, they're headed to the biggest spooky place yet in the title's Asylum, and as you can probably guess, their fake setups turn quite real, and the funnest part of the movie is trying to figure out when things become real because of how well the actors sell the fakes. They did a really good job of taking advantage of the upgraded camera technology of today with the use of drones and various lenses, so it felt very fresh despite the plot not being so. It's obviously not the most original story ever told, but it'll surprise you with quite a lot of original scares and well-paced tension. I respect films that have the time and care put in, even when knowing the plot, they could have gotten away with doing way less for a quick paycheck, especially considering most horror releases today do exactly that. If you dig horror and can sit through a movie in the found footage genre, this is a must-watch. This next film is gonna be another niche film, and I'm sorry that it's becoming somewhat of a theme in this video where I try to recommend things to people, but here we are. Possum is another film from 2018 that is extremely simple, yet unbelievably complex at the same time. Let me explain, or try to. Philip is a children's puppeteer that comes back home, forced to stay in the home with his uncle that abused him through childhood. He's repulsed by his terrifying spider-like marionette named Possum and spends most of the film trying to get rid of it, only for it to show back up not long after. There's a couple of other story elements that I won't spoil, but conversations with the uncle and the day-to-day travels and struggles of Philip cover most of the film. Atmosphere is the name of the game. From the gritty locations and unsettling soundtrack, Possum demands you stay in constant unease, never sure what could happen next. Almost like you're in the troubled mind of our main character, Philip. And that's a psychological horror done to perfection, if you ask me. I checked this out because of the spider and got way more than I signed up for. I've thought about this film every single day since checking it out, and that's something very special. In saying all this praise, though, it's entirely possible you could watch this and feel like you wasted your time. There's a lot of silent traveling, strange pacing, and random location switch-ups to keep you in the dark about what's really going on, so it can get confusing and annoying if you're into more traditional horror. But it's far from predictable, and I personally thought it was spectacular. That's it for niche things in this video, I promise. I watch a lot of YouTube, but so many channels are way beyond my numbers, so it wouldn't serve much help this early to push any. But I would like to talk about a strange one called Surveillance Cameraman. A man that walks up to random people with a video camera and just starts recording them. It's one of those things I don't condone at all, as it's very creepy, but I couldn't pull myself away from watching the 50-minute collection of all the parts that are out. There's something so fascinating about the rage that can come from a person when their privacy is invaded. The man filming often says it's just a video, there's cameras everywhere, so it seems the person is trying to convey that we should care more about the fact that we're being recorded damn near every place we go. And the comments to the video get pretty conspiracy heavy, but I'm honestly just here for the funny reactions and the occasional clip that gets quite sad.
I'm a homeless American. Would you not believe that? I'm homeless as hell. I don't own a home. I'm homeless. I got nowhere to sleep.
I'm no good at reviewing music, but I am passionate about it, so I just want to note a couple of albums that have come out this year I dig a lot. Thundercat's It Is What It Is, probably the one I've listened to the most. I think Thundercat has matured so much and his talent is limitless. This is my album of the year so far. And Tom Misch's What Kind of Music. If you want the perfect candlelit room with the headphones chill album, this is what you're looking for. I feel like Tom Misch can do no wrong. Yeah. So, check those out. That's gonna do it for this video. I have tons of other things I can bring up in more variety pack videos, and I plan to, but in this one I definitely wanted to cover what I mostly got into during quarantine. For more content like this, hit that subscribe button, like the video, and comment if you found something interesting on here, and I'll see you guys in the next one. See ya.